if you think about how you access a lot of the information and the things that you do day to day, whether that's booking flights or, accessing information, logging into your bank app, everything ties back to technology. And a lot of that technology, it just works. I remember whether it's like Instagram was down like a couple of months ago and everybody lost their minds.
Mm,
There's a specific role in tech for that. It's called site reliability, making sure that people can always be able to access the platform whenever it's needed. And today I have, you know, an OG in the space. I'll put it that way. I was recently at Blackest Tech, and he gave a really, really dope talk. I recently transitioned into solution architecture, so I was taking pictures of every single, diagram that he had on the screen because
yeah.
that just was so valuable to me. But today, our guest is Bobby D. He's a site reliability engineer, is a community builder, and he's really passionate about helping people, so Black people and my other minorities succeed in the tech industry. But I'm not gonna, I know I can't even cover the gamut of everything he's done. So welcome to the show. Can you, tell the audience a little bit more about you and what you do?
Well, first of all, Jawan, I want to say thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so looking forward to our conversation because I think the skill set that you're talking about around site reliability engineers is something that a lot of people don't know, that there's engineers that maintain the reliability of the site. Think of the name, but also that there might be an engineer that looks like me and you that's holding it down. So I've been in the field of engineering since about 2002. So that puts me about 20, 22 years at the keyboard. And yeah, I know I look a little young, and you're like 20 plus years working in tech has definitely been something that I've really enjoyed. My background is in systems engineering, but I'm also a software engineer. And I spent some time working at a really cool social media company. I don't know if your audience knows it. It's the one that used to be the little blue bird. You ever heard of that one before, Jawan?
I think I might have an idea.
Yes, I worked at Twitter for almost 10 years, becoming a staff engineer, staff site reliability engineer, managing one of the world's largest compute clusters. It took me a while to develop the skills, and definitely we'll be talking about them throughout our conversation today. But the one thing that I really enjoyed is really being able to showcase that someone that looks like me can really perform at that very high level. Because like you mentioned, when the system goes down, like when Instagram went down or when Twitter goes down, everyone in the world knows about it. And you really need to have engineers that have that really high level skills and proficiency of managing, distributed systems or at scale. It's definitely something that I'm always interested in chopping up a little bit. So definitely, thank you so much for inviting me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, one of the things that I'm drawn to as someone who's building, my own speaking skills is like just great speakers, and just like, again, as I said, like that was a really, really interesting conversation. I think what I really liked about it is that I think just in this whole realm of trying to bring more people to tech, I
Mm,
think there's one of the skills that will help is speaking to people, not at people. And
yeah.
sometimes it can feel a little bit that way with technology, with tech concepts, where it's like it's super high level and it's not going to people in a way that they understand. And I like how you're able to tie, the technology back to the examples and the real day to day situations. So
Yeah.
I want to take it back all the way to the beginning, right? And I typically ask this question because, again, tech and Black people has not always been synonymous. The goal is to get it there, right?
Yeah.
So in the beginning of your journey, how was this even a thing for you?
Yeah. So my journey is very unique. First of all, I'm like one of those that when I take a walk on the beach, I like to take the scenic route. I like to take the long way to get to where I got to go. And like I mentioned to your audience, I started back in 2002. I don't have a college degree, so I actually went to technical school, leveled up with certifications, and really just hit the ground running when I got into the industry. And one of my first roles in tech was working at the help desk. So I started off from the help desk and worked myself all the way up to eventually working at companies like Twitter and becoming a staff engineer. But it definitely was foundationally off the idea that my pops gave me. He was like, yo, I don't know if you want to spend all that money to go to school. But if you can, find a trade or a skill that you can really become proficient, and grow with it, before you know it, 5, 10 years from now, you don't know where you would be. And I really honored what he said, because my family, originally from Haiti, so sak passe to all my Haitians out there, and we're first generation here. So I'm actually one of the first people in my family born in this country. And with that said, I really, came from the bottom, and sometimes I say under the bottom, because we really did start, from scratch. But the lessons that I really learned as a kid is that, there's things that I always enjoyed doing. My mom used to tell me I used to break my toys all the time. I used to try to see how this thing works, and I really just over the years developed some really cool, obsession around tech. Because if you think about it, being an '80s baby, that's the era of when, TVs, VCRs, DVRs, the internet, like all of that was created in front of me. And somebody that was so intrigued about technology like me, I just, followed along, and I was on the wave from early days. And it just gave me that really foundational skill on, learning, developing, putting things into practice. I learned to write code when I was 14, 15 years old. And back then there was, some really some old school stuff, not what we have right now with this easier, compiled, or not compiled, but more, abstracted languages. But in general, the beginning of my journey just really started off with, starting at the bottom in terms of just getting into tech, working at the help desk, and eventually moving myself up into other positions, because systems engineering is where my main skill is. So that's, building computers, understanding the operating system connected to the internet, and also like orchestrating computers together, because automating yourself out of a job is definitely something that I've honored for a very long time. So that's how it all started for me.
That is so cool. And like, first of all, I just want to give a quick shout out to Frankie. Welcome to the stream. And then Terry, I see you throwing up those flags.
What up? What up?
Welcome, welcome, welcome. And if you're watching us, drop a like, say hi. We're definitely hoping to have like a really, really great conversation. Uh, and you touched on something that I think is very crucial. I started to see it as a pattern as I have more and more of these conversations. It's about the same skills that would help you succeed in tech.
Mm,
Are almost the same things, skills that help you succeed in life in general. And you talked about like the validity of that advice that your dad gave you, right? Around doing the fundamentals right. You don't want to start off your life and career with a ton of debt, but
yeah.
also you want to build the right skills that you can convert into money, right? Because ultimately that's what it's about. Many people, especially like with a lot of conversations around, student debt, it oftentimes it isn't viewed as an investment. It's like, I really have this passion, I have this nice thing I want to do. But then the reality does come due. How crucial, was having that advice at that young age, that even though I'm sure it probably didn't make sense all the way there in that moment, but at least it was there to guide you. And then maybe second of all is like, what was the journey to finding your first opportunity
Yeah.
out of, your training?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, this, and I'm going to put it straight up to you. Unfortunately, higher education to me, and some of your audience may agree with it, is a hustle. It's a business, right? And unfortunately, it's one of those, opportunities where, institutions can really, lock you into some debt that can never be, forgiven, right? It will always be following along with you. And it's something that my pops really gave me some insights to, because when I graduated high school, we didn't really have no money or trust fund or 529 put to the side. And I was like a C student. So I didn't really have, no scholarships lined up. So it was like, yo, you got to go get some debt. And I'm like, talk to my pops and my mother, and they were like, I don't know. We might, we can't sign for it. Meaning my parents, you're gonna have to do it yourself and or work while you're in school. And me, being a hustler that I am, I was like, you know what? I don't need the debt. I'm going to go just for 2 years technical school, and I'm going to actually have a full time job while I'm going to school. And my
Mm,
parents, helped me hold it down. Obviously, I had a roof over my head. I stayed local here in West Palm Beach, down here in South Florida. And it just gave me an avenue where I didn't have that weight that I carried as soon as I was done with school. Because I don't know about y'all, but it's like 90 days after you graduate, they already asking for a check type stuff, right? So I definitely wanted to make sure I was positioned in the right way, that when I had my first job opportunity, that I was actually giving back to my family, because that's what it really meant to me, getting my first opportunity. So it definitely something I avoid, and definitely for the next generation coming up, especially this skill in tech. There's nothing that you can't learn online. This is what the internet was created for, to share information. So if you really want to level up, there's multiple platforms, including the one you're watching us right now on YouTube. A lot of free content, Wikipedia, and don't forget that the libraries exist. I mean, I used to go to the library. That's how I had to do my research. But there's still ways for you to continue to develop without, spending all that money. But I will say that, going to my first opportunity working at the help desk, for me, it was, the school that I was at, the tech school, the vocational school. I had a career center, and the thing that I could not understand is why everybody in my class and that were looking for jobs were not obsessively going to the career center to go catch a job. So what I did was I actually started to volunteer at the career center, so that I was there helping other students, but also looking out for new job opportunities. A job hit the job board, and I was the first one to know about it. Guess who was the first one in line to interview? Your boy Bobby D, right?
Mm,
And then it was more or
mhm.
less a financial company that was looking for some entry level positions at the help desk. I went out there, and I've always been able to speak very well, like I'm speaking today. So I went over there and knocked it out of the park, and I also brought the tech portion with me. And the cool thing about it is actually when I started to work there, that's when I really started to fall even more in love with the idea of what I was developing. Because the thing that I really, that opened up my eyes in terms of what I could eventually work on, was working at the help desk gave me access to everyone's queue and in our Jira board or in our ticketing system. So I can see what all these engineers were doing. And I was like, oh, what type of engineer are they? What type of engineer are they? Like, actually, whenever somebody calls the help desk, I don't want to transfer a ticket to level two. I want to be level two, right? So before you know it, I started to sharpen my skills. And within 6 to 8 months, I got promoted from the help desk to the first level systems administrator. And I was like, word? Oh, then I guess y'all don't know how high I can go on this ladder. And I just kept chasing after that. And it really just changed my trajectory and really just opened up more opportunities for me, because most of these companies are looking for people that actually have real skill, not just theory. I'm talking about hands dirty and understand how these things work. And then if you can showcase that, it's a wrap. Those bags that you keep chasing, they're gonna come chasing you.
Mm, game. And you know what blows my mind, like in all of the things that you say, of course, like there's the people who are lazy who are not gonna do anything. But I think the people that my heart gets broken for is like the people who are putting in genuine effort to try to level up, to try to, get to that next point, but still can't quite make it. And I think you said something that was so instrumental. And I say this all the time. So pardon me, guys, I'm going to say it again. It's the fact that you have to be, you know, strategic in the way you move, right? All you had in that moment when you were put yourself in that situation to be so close to the job board was your time. But you leverage that to get first row seat to opportunities. And then when you got the next opportunity, you're like, you know what? Because I'm the traffic controller for these problems, I'm going to try to figure out what is the most important problem and how can I position myself. So when everybody looks at it, it's like, oh, he's lucky. He got this opportunity and then he got the next one. No, you literally figured out what was the next most important thing. And I think, you know, with all the hard work, you probably were not the most hardworking in that situation, but you still got the best opportunities. And I think that's something that's also required. It's like for people to understand that. So I know that that's something like you're a dot connector in your career, right? Even both
Yeah.
in the technology aspect and even like, what you do, as a person. How has that shown up for you outside of these two examples?
Yeah, I mean, it blew my mind in terms of how far and how close I can hit the star that I'm looking at, especially when I started to really just understand not just what access I had in terms of information, but then those that were around me. So I'm one of those that is also like a people connector. So I'm very, easygoing. I have a different type of way that I move, and the way that I am right now, this is how exactly I am in a workspace. And it also attracts people to me. And one of the things that I've really started to embrace, especially when I moved on from that one job into the next field, is that I could find technical mentors that they didn't even know they were my mentors, but also get to a point where I'm actually one of the leaders of a group. And I say this just to give you a quick example. So I had one of my technical mentors really just pull me to the side at one time, and he was like, Bobby, at the end of the day, wherever you in your work journey, if you're ever working in a place and you're the smartest person, you need to leave. You need to go find another opportunity. And the thing that he said in terms of the gauge for me is like when you first start up in your role, you're the one that's asking questions like, how do you do this? How do you do that? Soon as you make that transition to those same mentors that you felt like were your technical mentors are asking you a question, oh, it's time for you to move on. And I tell you, soon as I
Mm.
honored that, I moved on from one step to the next step to the next step. And then that's why I was able to, make my moves at Twitter and really just change the game for those that were around me. Because first of all, I'm looking for the smartest person in my peer group. Oh, yeah, you know how the kernel really works? Oh yeah, let me check this out. And then I started to develop, and then they start asking me, all right, it's time for me to move on to the next thing. Oh, you know how cloud really works? All right, let me see if I can figure out how Docker, file system isolation, Kubernetes, and all that works. Oh, word. All right, I'm going to run all of this. And then that's when it just really starts to compound in interest as you're developing and really just taking this knowledge grab that I've been, pursuing for so long. And then you get to really see the value behind all the things that you've, accomplished. So definitely big shout outs to my technical mentors. Some of them have passed on. There were some really older fellas that they were like hardcore Unix administrators because I really learned not
Mm.
just Windows as an operating system, but I learned Unix, Sun, Solaris, HPUX, and really low level, systems administration. So that when I went to Red Hat and Linux, I was balling, right? I was killing it. And then I had a certification to get it. It was a wrap. There was nothing I couldn't talk about. But it was really just foundationally those doors and insights that my technical mentors provide me, and I just kept running.
So to piggyback off of that, right? Networking is something that's so crucial in tech, right? It really does take a village. Nobody knows everything. And, there's multiple levels to that. There's peer, like, networking, there's like networking up the ladder, there's mentorship, there's all those different things. For someone who's new to the industry, that can feel like a lot. What's a simple way to start to build up that muscle?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say number one, if you're not on this platform, I don't know where you're at, LinkedIn. Get connected to LinkedIn because this is how you start to build those first steps in terms of building that network. The other thing is technologists like me that like to talk about tech. I used to tell mentees this all the time. My door is always open. Like, come and pull up and come and chat with me. But nobody comes through the door. I'm like, I don't know what y'all doing because I'm here trying to give y'all game. If y'all really want it, come through. Is to really honor that, right? Is to really reach out and really, mindful way. Don't go over there and be like, hey, can you be my mentor? I actually mentioned something like technical mentor. When I say technical mentor, I had mentors that didn't even know they were my mentors. Like they didn't know that I was following along and I was watching all the tickets they were creating or the code they were doing or the projects they were working on. That's how you actually create that mentor connection, right? It's like, oh, I've been following your moves. Can we talk about this, package that you're developing or the software you're developing? And guess what? That's an engaging conversation to, wow, I didn't know Bobby was interested in understanding how this works. You know what? Next time we have a project, we should include him in the conversation. And guess what? Now my network is growing, right? So much so that my network is my net worth, right? It's like my
Mm.
value system around any opportunities. If I, wanted to get back in the game and get back at the keyboard, I mean, I got peoples at all of these companies from Google, Facebook, Amazon, Meta, all of them, right? And my way of, developing that relationship has definitely allowed me to maintain those connections with my peers out there. So definitely continue to build network. Don't be afraid to engage. Do it with some purpose, not just, hey, I'm just trying to know this person. No, I want to really understand what they're doing and their contributions. I want to follow along. I want to subscribe to their GitHub and see what code they're publishing. Like really dive deep. And technologists like me that are looking for that, I'm here just trying to pour my cup. You just got to put your cup right under it, because I'm definitely here to give that knowledge and experience. It's just you got to reach out and definitely honor that connection and follow up. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so powerful, like what you said, right? Because there's a lot of people who get inspired, right? Like you give a talk, now everybody comes and says, "Hey, that's a good talk. Can I do this? Can I do that?" And all of that is nice, right? I think the next level is where, like, 97% of the people fall off, right? It's like, who is staying engaged? Who is following up? Who has said, you know what, I have gotten this information at a high level, but I want to go the next level.
Yeah.
And it's like, because what you said to me I've seen that's so powerful is that, you want someone to mentor you. First of all, yes, don't lead with mentor me. But second of all, if you go into that conversation and you break something that they said down to them and say how it resonated with you, you could get them talking for like 30 minutes straight. A lot
Facts.
of times, I see there's so much burden, like when someone says, for example, you know, I want to get into tech, but I'm not even sure what role I should take. A lot of these times, the reason why you never get that response back is if the person was to give you a real response, it could take a whole day.
Mm,
So it might just be better to not even start the conversation. But if you said, you know what, Bobby, like, I'm trying to get into like site reliability engineering, but there's this, thing that's kind of like stuck my mind about this specific topic, and this specific topic. And I realized that maybe I'm more suited to X. Would this still be a thing to do if I did that? That offers way more value to the person. And it's like, you get that answer clear, because what it also shows is that you value the time of the person you're asking for their time back. Is that you've done some work and like it's clear that the point specifically where you're stuck, versus saying, "Oh, this is the whole road. Can you point me in the right direction?" So that's something that I found interesting about that response. And I think ultimately, if I boil it down to one thing, it's value. Value
yeah.
people's times, show your own value too, and I think the value will ultimately come back to you.
Roger that.
So you worked in multiple industries, you worked in multiple sectors, and in a variety of different roles. What has that transition journey been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that one thing that I really embraced early is that all of these different fields, from tech to health to Fortune 500 to all the way to FANG like companies, they're all involved in tech, right? If they have an email system, if they have a file system where they share files, if they're doing things out in the cloud, they are all doing it. So it actually just really became like, oh, the field is wide open. It just depends on where I want to hang out at, or where I want to develop at. Don't let it limit yourself, because the hospital, guess what? They have computers there that they have to connect to a network that has some server and some server room, and somebody's managing those servers. Guess what? That's a systems engineer. Or the application that they're using, it's this nice, web interface. Somebody had to write that code, CSS, HTML, JavaScript, TypeScript. Like, those skills are going to be needed. So I've always felt like, don't limit yourself in terms of what lane you want to pursue. Just make sure that you're
Mm,
learning the foundational skill sets, right? It's like, how do I
mm,
learn? How do I, develop? What things can I actually touch and really feel how it really works? And don't just only do surface stuff. Like, go deeper into it. Like, and this is something that I did in my talk when we had a conversation at Black is Tech. Is like, hey, y'all know what Docker is, but do y'all know the underlying kernel modules that actually allows for the isolation that we all depend on, like C group and namespace, and how it works? It's like, always try to go deeper into understanding what the technology does, because once I learned Docker, containerization, Kubernetes, I can work in healthcare, I can work in fintech, I can work in FANG companies, I can work in Fortune 500 companies. It's like, yo, this era that companies have embraced this idea of technologies is like a must for them to succeed. It allows them to develop, business requirements in terms of just making money, revenue, not wasting time, and just really just having secure infrastructure. Just thinking about cybersecurity type stuff, but they all need it. It just depends on which area you want to pursue. But I always say, learn the foundational type stuff and be willing to dive a little bit deeper, because you might discover something new.
That is so cool. One of the things that I think is always missing, a lot of times when people talk about tech content, In fact, it's so funny. Like I was at an event recently and someone was saying something about like, they're so tired of like, this product manager content on TikTok where it's like, look at my life and now I do nothing and get paid all this money. It's so far from the truth, right? But for the person who's out there, that may be like the most relatable thing, right, to them. But bringing it back to reality, I know that every tech journey, like if you see someone who's reached like the top of their career, like you did, right? It doesn't come without challenges. It doesn't come without setbacks. To bring people back to the reality of the other side, what was some of those things that you faced in your career, right? Whether like, it's like losing a role, a position, or um, getting this close to like an interview, but it not working out, but
Yeah.
still, figuring out ways to be successful with that. What are some of those examples that, you can share with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, one that comes to mind, especially with the wave or the roller coaster that we're on right now in this industry, is being laid off. One of my
Mm,
first jobs, I actually got a pink slip. I got laid off, and it was the one that was the help desk that I got promoted to, systems administrator. And I'm like, all right, I'm trying to go all the way over there. And then one day I come in and I got a pink slip. I'm like, word. I was like, but I'm balling. I'm proficient. I take care of anything and everything. Is just understanding that unfortunately, we are a line item on a spreadsheet, and you always got to remember that. The other
mm,
thing is that I was happy that I experienced that early in my career, so that I can peep game as I'm going through the industry. And I was out before companies started to talk about layoffs, and or let's say at Twitter, kind of peeping game that somebody's about to come and acquire the company. Oh, word, somebody's going to come and buy it. All right, I've been here for a minute. It's time for me to go do something else. And less than 6 months later, or less than 3 months later, Elon went over there and purchased and slashed all these positions. And that's like not like, hey, you all are unproficient, because the smartest engineers I've ever worked with was at that building, and they basically
mm,
were laid off for that. I would say also like the interview process. I mean, our industry is really brutal when it evaluates you. I interviewed at Google at least 2 times, and each time they said no. But it didn't set me back. It just only meant like, all right, I need to get back to the gym and I need to work on my free throw. I need to work on my 3 point. I need to work on my dribble, right? And it always just ultimately helped motivate me even more. Because the third time I went to go over there, they were like, "Hey, we want to offer you something." And I was like, "Hey, I'm actually at Google. I mean, I'm actually at Twitter, and I'm actually about to get promoted to a senior staff. So I'm going to go, hold it down type stuff." But in general, what those setbacks have really done for me is just really just not scar my spirit, but help lift and motivate me, because it was always like, yo, a word, they can cut me like that, even if I'm the guy, or dang, they're going to tell me no. When I'm over here at this company, taking care of, billion-dollar, systems, a word. All right, let me get back into the gym. Let me keep working out. Let me keep developing. And definitely it was a motivator for me instead of a setback. So I definitely want to encourage those that have experienced it. Number one, don't think it's you, and definitely don't allow it to scar your spirit, because you definitely have something very unique. You just got to keep pushing, keep at it. And those doors and lanes will open up as you keep pushing forward. So that would be my, advice for those that may have dealt with those type of setbacks.
That is so powerful. And it's like, I think it kind of like aligns with my mindset as well. I think one of the things that's very helpful in tech is how to reframe failure, right? Just like you did, right? And ultimately get in there, because imagine if you quit altogether, like after the first try at Google, right? You eventually got to the goal, and even then, like you didn't want it anymore, right? And that's the beauty of it. I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. I almost feel like one one thing that often gets missing, is that almost every process in life kind of like does this to us. But I think for tech, maybe because we're not traditionally in these industries, I see a lot of folks who look like me, and you struggle with this particularly. Is that I
Yes.
send a couple of job applications. Once I don't hear back, maybe it's not really meant for me. I did an interview, it went really horribly. So you know what? I'm not gonna pursue it anymore. But it's that every new step. So first of all, getting that first call back sets you up for your first interview. That's the way
Yeah,
to think about it. And
for sure.
understand you've never had an interview before. So the goal, even for that, I mean, if you get lucky and you get hired, great. But let the goal be that this score for this interview is 10. The
Mm.
goal for the next one is 15 or 20. And if you keep that mindset and go that way, you realize one day, surprisingly, you will get to that 100. And one of the
Yeah.
things that I think a lot of people even miss out on is that one of my one of my worst interviewing experiences, and I don't mean worse in that it was definitely one of the most pleasant, but where I felt like I let myself down is one of the things that has made me such a, a better interview. I don't want to say great. I got asked, I prepared for this interview so much that I was so fixated on answering questions about potentially what I'm going to do on the role. And the
Mm.
one question that tripped me up was about a past role. So it was
Mm.
so disappointing in the sense that, like, I did this. How couldn't I even speak to this when I did it? But do you think that's ever happening again? It's not.
Exactly.
And that's
Yep.
the thing. It's like, regardless of, so I think that's the perspective that people miss. It's like, you have to take that pain and figure out a way to use it. And I think that's something that you highlighted in your story. But, I think that that's dope. And I think that's a way to approach it. So, as you navigated these different roles, because I know that Twitter is the big one. I definitely want to spend some time there to uncover all the amazing work that you did there. How did that happen?
Yeah. So I got recruited back in 2013. And it was actually a recruiter that reached out to me on LinkedIn. Big shout outs to John Rowland. And he kind of seen some stuff that I've been working on because I used to post all kinds of stuff online all the time. And that was kind of like my way of letting the world know, like, hey, I'm out here doing some stuff. So he stumbled upon a blog post that I wrote about a tech that I was working on. So he gave me a call and he was like, hey, we got an open position. I was like, word? I was like, what company is it? He was like, Twitter. I was like, Twitter? What's Twitter? And I was like, oh, let me go install this app real quick. And I was like, oh, that Twitter. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. I got an account. Like, can I apply for this job? Because they wouldn't even let you apply for the job unless you had a Twitter account. But the thing is that when I went to go interview, I was ready. I was ready. I was primed. And I'll tell you how I did it. So one of the things that I really started to do in my journey while I was working at a company called Citrix Systems down here in South Florida is I was already ready to move on because I was getting bored there. I wasn't learning and there was really not that many people that were at my level and I needed to, take that next jump. I really got into this mindset of, hey, I should manifest where I want to be and what type of role I want. And I actually tell my mentees
Mm,
to do this exercise is I started to go to the websites at companies I wanted to work at, like Yahoo, AOL, Google was still, there at that time. Amazon was just at the beginning. But I was like, all right, let me go to Google's website. Let me see if I can find a job. Oh, I like that job. It's a systems engineering job managing large scale, hyper scale infrastructure. I was like, all right, print that job listing, right? I put it on my board. So every day I see it. But not that I just see it, but I also highlighted all the skills that I felt like I didn't understand, I didn't know, and I need to close the gap. So what I did for the next 3 months is every day I walked in, I was like, oh, I need to go learn this technology called Hadoop. What the heck is Hadoop? All right, let me go learn it. I'm actually going to go and develop, right? And then I was like, all right, what is this thing called MapReduce? All right, let me go figure it out. Or what is this thing called distributed file system, right? I was like, all right, let me go figure it out. And let me tell you, what it did was it forced me to learn skills that the industry was looking for. Because when Twitter called me, guess who was ready to talk about Hadoop, HDF, MapReduce, talk about building systems from scale, building data centers. I was ready. I was primed because I had this job description that constantly reminded me on the skills I need to develop. And when I went to Twitter, it was a wrap. That same day when I walked out, the same afternoon, they was like, "Yo, can you start on Monday?" And it was a wrap because it was definitely one of those opportunities that I just, I'm very comfortable in the interview. I'm speaking in an interview like this, and then they see my personalities, and then my skill set was at a very high. And I was already 10 years in the industry when I went to go work at Twitter in 2013. So that just opened up the door. And when I got to Twitter, oh man, it was definitely an eye opener from culture wise because I used to work in Fortune 500 where I didn't have to wear a suit and tie to work, but I definitely had to wear some slacks, a nice shirt tucked in with the belt. Like I look like one of those techie persons, right, with a little pager on the side or BlackBerry on my side, right. And then when I get to Twitter, I see people wearing sandals to work. I seen even a guy have a kilt, tank tops, and they just hanging out, and I'm like, word, this is how y'all move? I guess y'all don't know. And then I had a manager that really honored this thing for me to be myself. And he was like, yo, Bobby, just be yourself. I was like, you sure you want me to be Bobby D? That's who you want me to be coming into work? I was like, all right, then. I came into work one day with my Miami Heat hat on. I had my Jordans on. I was sliding, I was moving, and I was like the only one. And everybody was like, there we go. That's the person we need in this organization. Because from that moment on time, it was like, yo, I'm setting a new standard. Called myself working at Twitter as like a cultural mentor. I was like, yo, just chill, relax. You already got through the interview. Now we just need to train you up, and I guarantee you got it. And it just really just opened up my development working at Twitter. And I worked on
Mm,
some really cool systems. I mean, like I said, talking about data centers, I worked on building some of the world's largest data centers from the ground up, and really just building, infrastructure from servers, racks, connecting them to the network, but ultimately getting them in production as quickly as possible. I mean, a lot of people don't know that Twitter built its own data center, and we were like number on the list at Intel. We were like number 5 or 6 in terms of companies that bought processors from them. That's how many computers we
mm.
were, building and actually, setting up and distributing all around the world. And it was something that just really just opened my eyes, because remember, I was in the game for 10 years, and then they were like, yo, can you do some of these things? I was like, oh, I can do this with my eyes closed. Yeah, y'all don't know what kind of administrator I am. And it's like, all right, can you automate this? Guess what? I'm about to learn Python, because I did learn Perl before going to Twitter, but then Twitter actually taught me Python because they had a Twitter university there. And as soon as I got Python, it was a wrap. I was done. Configuration management, I used to run Puppet. I used to just write code all the time, and it just really just changed the mindset of even my development, because that opened up the pathway for me to go into site reliability engineering. So I started off as a systems engineer at Twitter, and then I eventually transitioned into site reliability engineer, and then that's when I really took it to another level.
So speaking about that work, because I think I'm especially like blown away by that. I want to set the context, for a lot of people who may not fully understand what the gamut of that looks like. So if you think about every single thing that we consume on the internet, even this live stream, it's data. Literally, like it was in one of like that I realized that what streaming even meant was data streaming, right? not like
Yeah.
and data is what powers everything. Like you're accessing a website, it's whether an API making a call to another service to serve you that page. It's all data that's stored somewhere, and the internet basically serving you that data. And data is such a key thing. Even when you think about, ChatGPT or AI, everything is still working based on existing data. So data is such a huge part. And when you think about social media companies where people are uploading videos, writing text, putting pictures, all of those things take up space. I mean, think about even on your phone right now, right? You're probably having to either pay Apple some more money to increase your iCloud,
Yeah.
or deleting some pictures you don't really want to delete. But ultimately, that's what you were doing at scale for a company that had, a few 100 million users, right?
Mm.
What does that look like? Especially like in a world where, everybody's like hosting their data in the cloud with companies like Amazon, AWS,
Yeah.
GCP, and all of that. But y'all did your own thing. Talk me through that story.
Yeah. So the thing about Twitter, and people are like, they're just tweets. I was like, all right, then you think it's just tweets. You know how much systems and infrastructure we need just for that one tweet, and/or the replication factors that we have in place. Because if one data center goes down, we got to make sure we're still serving it. And then once we start to introduce media like images and then videos, I mean, you are right. Like that's storage. That's petabytes to exabytes of data that we had to be able to manage, and we had to replicate that and make sure that it's always available on the West Coast, it's always available on the East Coast, it's available overseas, like that infrastructure. And I'll just give you an illustration. So in one of our data centers, the one that I manage, we had multiple. I can't tell you how many because then I might get a letter from Elon or something like that. But anyways, one of those data centers could hold over 500,000. I'm sorry, 100,000 nodes in it. Nodes are servers. So more than 100,000 computers in one building. What does a data center look like? Just imagine like a warehouse, and we used to stack computers from the floor to the ceiling, and we filled it up, right? But then if you think about virtualization, more specifically, not at the hyper level, hypervisor, I'm talking about more containerization. One of our clusters, we ran over 500,000 containers. 500,000 containers in one building. And then think about data
Yeah.
wise. We talked about HDFS and Hadoop. Twitter ran one of the world's largest Hadoop HDFS clusters with petabytes of data, right? And if you just think about the scale, a warehouse filled with computers, floor to the ceiling, and there's only like 4 or 5 of us that's running this whole thing, right? And then we got multiple buildings. And I mean, running it, we definitely had people at the data center physically there, but in terms of like systems engineering and site reliability engineering, the ones that were overseeing it, it definitely ratio wise, it was like maybe 1,000 to 1, like 1,000 servers to one node or one person, or 10,000 to 1. Actually, I apologize, because we had at least a few administrators at that level, but hundreds of thousands of nodes to manage. And then just think about the network connection. Like the other cool thing about working at Twitter is I got to understand what the like backplane of the infrastructure of the internet really looks like. Like the network pipes are about this big, right? And it's like that's always sending traffic back and forth, and we're sending it from one building to the next building. It just blows my mind on how much infrastructure is out there, and a lot of people don't even really understand how it works. So that's why it's like in terms of skill wise, I definitely feel like developing systems engineering, software engineering, site reliability engineering, DevOps, and those type of skill sets. There's always going to be a job for you, regardless of what AI is coming up with, because you still need a physical, but also the understanding of how these things really talk and communicate with each other. But the scale was massive. I've never worked on that scale before, and our peers in the industry were Facebook and Google. Like you see how big their scale is. That's how big we were, and we're just really competing with them in terms of managing hyperscaled distributed systems.
And one of the things that fascinated me, when you were talking about this, was the idea that you guys had to do things that were a little unconventional, right? Like there was no playbook anywhere, right? You guys were figuring this out. And this is one thing that I really like, especially given that this is something like super technical. In product, it's easy to be creative, right? But I think in technology, it might be a bit harder, but it probably is better to do it there because it's like, I think that's where first principles thinking comes in. It's like, don't think about the problem the same way everybody has thought about it. Completely compartmentalize every unit of that problem and see if there's a better way to put it all together. I think one of the things that you talked about was how y'all did load balancing, for example. And again, to translate, what load balancing means, it typically just means that if you think about like if you had, two phones somewhere and like, one was completely off, but you still needed the other one to run, there's a way that you could move the data from that one to the other one and get it to run without necessarily doing that. And that's very important for hyperscale systems like you're describing because, there'll be maintenance, other things like that. So what was that solution like that you built that helped you do that? Because I was really fascinated about that story that you didn't even need to notify the data owners that you're shutting down the system. It just shuts down and like you're able to, that's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. So the cool thing about where we've been iterating in our industry, so we've started off with these big old computers, IBM mainframes. They're huge, right? And then we got into the more pizza boxes like Dell, R700s, Blade Centers were something that really came out. And then we started to get into the software and the operating system and doing hypervisor. That's where VMware, let's say Zen, and then LXC that came out inside the Linux kernel. And then we took that to the next level and down to the application level, which is containerization. But there was a concept that was introduced once we got to containerization called microservices. I'm not sure if you know what that is, but it's basically saying, hey, instead of having this one big old app that does everything, let's break off this one piece. It does one thing. Let's break off this one piece and does this. Let's break off this one piece and does that. And then orchestrational wise, you all are kind of working on your individual pieces, but the consumer just thinks that it's one system, right? So what happens is as soon as you create that microservices and they get down to the containerization and you design it in a way that you can have multiple instances of your container. So this one API is actually 20 instances, or at Twitter scale, 2,000 to 20,000 instances. We could basically always have those instances running. So when people come into our data centers, they're always going to one of those instances that are working. And as soon as we say, hey, we need to bring down a rack, we need to bring down some servers, we can just easily remove that one instance. Right? You had 20 instances running. Now we only have 19 instances. There's one of them that fell off. Maybe it broke or some type of maintenance need to happen. but we're still at that same level where we're able to service all those connections that are coming in. And this is where site reliability comes into play, because site reliability engineering really focuses on how do you design systems that could take advantage of systems breaking or components breaking and things like that, but it all is still running. Is the adoption of microservices and getting down to containerization so that you can do that load balancing and distributing loads easily with something like service discovery, but more specifically, just designing systems so that they could fail. And as long as you're doing that, oh my gosh, you can grow to any scale. Like I said, 500,000 containers, and all of that was microservices. And if we needed to bring down something, I didn't even need to tell the service owners. I just brought down a rack, and then in their charts they'll just see one little drop, and then all of a sudden that instance come back up, and it comes back up, and they don't even need to worry about it, because that's the type of iteration that we developed working at that level. And site reliability engineering practices are really foundational around that.
And it's so another thing that I think you had touched on that I really like, because it's such a big conversation across the industry right now, is the issue of cost, right? I think everybody's just says, you know what, move to the cloud, it's gonna be fine. It's cheaper, it's faster. But I think a lot of people are realizing, and there's a serious conversations happening at enterprise level, right? I think just because of how huge consumers of data, Twitter must be, right? You guys already saw that problem from day one and decided to approach that challenge in a different way.
Yeah.
How exactly was, that work for you? And like, I think you talked about even some of the creative ways you had to get around certain challenges, like space and things like that. What does that look like?
Yeah, so if y'all didn't know, all of these cloud providers, AWS, GCP, Azure, it's all a hustle. Just know it's all a hustle, right? And let me tell you, their numbers can be easily tweaked once they raise the cost by a penny, right? They're at pennies, right? They raised it by one penny, that's millions and billions of dollars. So it's a hustle. So mindset wise, one of the things that we realized at Twitter is like, hey, we're not going to go run in cloud services because we'll definitely get burned in the long run, because we're growing massively, right? Is if we go and build our own infrastructure and actually go down to the level of building our own hardware. Twitter built our own hardware because we had a hardware engineering team, is that we can get that cost all the way down to the manufacturer cost. Like it's like MSRP, like the lowest level type cost. And then when you actually compare it to what cloud is versus what your charge or what your cost is, there's no comparison. It's like, yo, how many more data centers can we build out? So one of the things about building that type of infrastructure is also you also run into inefficiencies inside of the data center. And this is where during that talk at Black is Tech that I really just enlighten you all on some of the challenges that I helped overcome at Twitter, and being able to save them a good grip or two. And we'll talk about the cost savings. But the idea is that those storage systems that you're talking about, we have tens of thousands of them, but the computing resources on them were very minimal because we're using the hard drives in them to store data. But guess what? The CPU is just sitting there not doing anything. It's like, all right, I'll send this data. I'll send this data. And about 80 to 90% of every CPU in our data center was underutilized, right? So it's like, all right, what technology have I used in my past that potentially I could help introduce in the infrastructure at scale and save us a good grip or two? And this is where containerization really just took it to the next level, right? I was one of those that when inside of Solaris, which is an older operating system, they introduced something called zones, which is the same thing that's introduced in the Linux kernel called C group and namespace. Is I already had experience with cutting that down and doing that. And this is the thing that I always tell a lot of people is like the knowledge you gain is the real asset, right? I spent some time working at that company. I gained an asset, which is the knowledge, because when I came to Twitter, I was like, oh, I remember how I did that over there. Guess what? Let me go and implement it here. And the results were is that we were able to run computing and storage machines on the same bare metal machine, and we saved them. We were trying to get to 130 million, but we end up saving them 122 million year over year. And it's still working
So
right now.
not so great.
Not so great. We didn't hit our mark. So we got about 122, but we didn't hit our mark. Dang. That was always
Yeah,
the
that
line.
is.
Everybody realized that. Yeah.
No, but it is really fascinating, and again, like I said, like I know I'm probably more passionate than most on this because like this is like my lived experience right now. So In fact, I'm being like, I took your talk literally to walk and like had this whole conversation about it.
That's what's up.
So in terms of, you know, a career plan for someone who, wants to get to where you are, maybe doesn't even want to go the system engineers route and wants to be a site reliability engineer, are there courses or programs or learnings or how to kind of like think about a framework for building a career to
Yeah.
potentially maybe get to like a fan company?
Yeah. Well, I will say the company that coined site reliability engineer is Google. And they're probably by
Mm.
one of the best resources out there in terms of two great books about site reliability engineering, a lot of great research papers about it. And if you don't know, Google has a really cool blog site where you can always look up what's going on in their industry or what's going on behind the door in the engineering realm. And a lot of site reliability engineers contribute to stuff like that. So I would definitely encourage you to do some research online around that. Don't go pay for anything, right? Just look for the free resources out there. The second thing is just understand the actual principles around site reliability engineering, because I think sometimes they get confused with DevOps engineering and they say site reliability engineering is the same thing, and actually we're not, right? Where we're complementary to each other. And the way that I like to describe site reliability engineers is like we're the diplomats for the customers, the people that are using your system that DevOps engineers are building, right? And yeah, just because we know how your system works doesn't mean that that's our responsibility, because we're diplomats for the customer. So you're saying, hey, we need to introduce this new, let's say, CI/CD pipeline. And as a site reliability engineer, I'm like, hey, that's actually going to affect our SLAs or SLIs based on what we had agreed upon. And the SLO for the end of this quarter is going to be failed because we don't have any error budget. That's me being a diplomat to represent what the user experience is versus the systems that you're going to develop and change, right? So that's where it's just understanding the different type of use cases for both, but also developing the skills around DevOps engineer. So I'm a DevOps engineer also, right? But I'm also a software engineer, because site reliability engineer is on the other side of the table with software engineers, where site reliability engineers be like, hey, software engineer, we're using a library that has increased latency. And unfortunately, our customers, which I'm the diplomat for, are having some performance issues. Can y'all fix it? And they'd be like, hey, we might not be able to fix it, but hey, as a site reliability engineer, I can dive into the code and make contributions at that level, right? So that's why the cool thing about
Mm.
site reliability engineers is that we really do pivot from systems engineer, system design, infrastructure, to application development, software development, and even down into runtime and kernels, right? Because we're always representing the customer and being that diplomat for them, because nobody honored the 99.9% time uptime more than us, right? And I was like, how can we make sure y'all don't break this stuff? I got to know how all this stuff works, right? And that's what site reliability engineer, in terms of the role, really foundationally leans on. So if you are looking to get into this field, don't feel like you're only limited by systems engineering skills or software engineering skills. It's really like, how can you broaden your knowledge to understand the reliability of the systems you're developing, and then also understanding SLOs, SLIs, and SLAs, service level agreements, service level objectives, and service level indicators, and then obviously using metric data, using logs, and using all of these resourceful things to really just understand how healthy your systems are. And then remember, you're always the person that's there representing the customer, because if the site went down, they're looking for the site reliability engineers. The site is down. What? I'm the one that's there to help bring it up, identify the cause, incident management, have postmortems, and really just follow up so that infrastructure, systems, and applications don't affect our customers as frequently based on the error budget. So that would definitely be some of the skills that I would encourage those that are interested in. And a lot of this stuff is available online. And go check the source, because Google was definitely the one that coined the term and has definitely released some really good content out there.
Absolutely. And we can't forget about the money, right? A
Oh,
lot of people are interested in tech for the money, right? And that's a good thing. I'm not gonna knock it, right? It's the tech hustle for a reason.
facts.
So what is the earning potential like, for someone who wants to get into this position?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to gauge, especially where I'm at in my journey. Remember, I've been doing this for 20 plus years, and I'm sitting at a table that a lot of people that look like me and you just don't even know it's possible, right? And if you are getting into the industry, Definitely, in my opinion, I tell my mentees this all the time, and it might sound harsh, but if you're shooting for six figures, you're shooting too low. Your
Hmm.
mindset wise is shooting too low if just getting to that first 100 is it, right? Because the range and spectrum goes even higher than that, right? But the skill set itself, you got to bring and put in the work to develop the skills to demand that higher salary, right? But the range could be, entry level, I would say, is about 80 to 100,000. And then once you get into like level two and senior level, you're definitely doubling that. A lot of FANG companies use, stocks, what are called, restricted stock options or RSUs, are ways for them to, number one, get you at a lower base salary, but then your bonuses in terms of your stocks, especially when they invest, are, crazy, right? And that's what really allowed me to get to the next level is because now my stocks are starting to vest, and I'm like, word. And I called my wife and I was like, yo, did you check our swap account? Because I see this number and I don't know if you believe it the way that I do, type stuff. It's possible. And it's really based on the development and really sharpening the skills. And I talked about this earlier. Chase the knowledge because the bags will follow. As long as you develop the knowledge, I guarantee you those bags will come from all over the place and you don't even know where they came from. And low key, I tell people this all the time that the richest man in the world wrote me a check even when he wrote a check for Twitter. So definitely, I'm sitting at a different type of table.
I'm stealing that from you, by the way. Chase the bag, chase the skills, and the bag will come running. Yeah.
Facts.
So first of all, shout out to William. Appreciate you always rocking with us and always showing love. Appreciate you, brother. Um, I definitely want to talk about Tech Hustle, right? Because I don't know. Yeah, I think most people should know, but if you don't know, you know, Bobby is also a great speaker. I mean, you could probably tell from rocking with us the past hour, always giving back the knowledge I've learned from him. Like my very first interaction was value packed, and he's come back to share with me and y'all again. So I'm grateful for that. But I think your work is bigger than that. So can you share more about like this work and what inspires it?
Yeah, for sure. So, like I said, I was at Twitter for a good minute, and I decided that I really didn't needed to take some of the things I developed at Twitter and give it back to the world. So, a lot of things that also I'm only talking about engineering, but just think about how many other Black engineers that were working at Twitter. It was very scarce, and so much so that I helped develop a slight change in our organization that allowed for more people that look like me and you to get hired at that company. So much so that when I left Twitter, there was so many people of color inside of engineering. I was like, dang, we did it type stuff. But some of those same things are stuff that I want to bring out into the community, into our behind the closed doors, behind the vault, into the real world. And the reason why I created the Tech Hustle is it. Well, let's define it first. The Tech Hustle is a tech community that's primarily focusing on motivating, inspiring, and taking the next generation as far as we can go. We're really going to build billion-dollar companies being a part of this company, and we're going to be doing it with the knowledge that I've gained, but also the community overall. The community itself is an online community that's really, like I said, developing a way for us to really connect with you all and let you know, number one, that you're great, that these skill sets that I have, if you're part of our community, you can get them for free type stuff. So pull up. But in general, just really just trying to change the mindset of those that are interested in tech because there's so many other skills out there outside of just software engineering or just web development, and no shade to them, but look at the other side. There's systems engineering from network data centers, databases. Like there's so many other skills, and we're really just trying to help develop our next generation, especially with this thing called AI at the cuff. So we really do focus on upskilling. And yeah, in terms of how you can access us, thetechhustle.com. Definitely check us out. We do a podcast that we publish weekly, so definitely check out our YouTube also. So big shout outs to you if you already are a part of our community. We do a monthly newsletter where we actually talk about the technology that we talked about during our newsletter, and also if I'm working on a new project because I'm always working on something new. And definitely, I travel the country. Actually, I travel the world as a public speaker, talking about my journey in tech. And yeah, definitely always looking for to develop a community that looks like me. So come and pull up. I got you for sure.
Amazing. I don't know if that's because typically when we wrap this up, you always get some time to either like say any last words or promote anything. Again, you have all the time.
No worries, no worries. So I told you about the tech hustle, but let me tell you a little bit about Bobby D. So Bobby D is my other brand, it's my personal brand, and if you're not building a personal brand, I always want to encourage you not just to be limited by where your job is and what your role is, but you can easily create a brand or persona that represents what you really want to be, right? And Bobby D is definitely that. So Bobby D, in terms of my personal brand, speaks on stages around the world about my journey in tech, but I'm also working on a book. It's titled Breaking Barriers, My Journey to the Top in Tech, where I talk about a lot of the experiences that I had working at Twitter, from a chapter that's called The World Knows Me, but y'all don't know me yet. And we briefly talked about, Instagram being down, but I remember the time that Twitter went down and the world doesn't know that it was Bobby D that was back there. That. Turn on CNN. Let's see if they notice. And I hit the button, and 5 minutes later, CNN says, breaking news, Twitter's back up and we're running, right? It's like the world knows me, but y'all don't know me yet. And that's really what Bobby D, in terms of speaking opportunities and speaking on stages around the world, is really focused on. So definitely pull up at the Tech Hustle. You can find out all the information about me. And then, yeah, definitely check out on the Tech Hustle. We're really trying to change the mindsets. And Jawan, I want to say thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to shine just a little bit, and talk some tech stuff, right? Because you can see how passionate I am about it. And I just can't wait until we get more people that look like me and you ready to receive this message, because I'm here pouring it out, and I just want you to bring your cup, and I got you for sure. So as always, thank you so much. And I look forward to, chatting up with everybody in the comments below, but also, hit us up in our community.
Absolutely. Wow. This has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and your time. This has been great. Again, like I said, I'm a student of yours because there's so much to learn for me in that space. And you always bring in game every single time. This has been the show tonight, everyone. Big shout out to Bobby D. Show him some love in the comments. Show him some love on LinkedIn as well. Let him know, we really value his time and his knowledge. This is the show for tonight. We'll see you again next week when I think we got two more episodes of the Working in Tech live stream.